Hey guys, welcome to Code Decode. In this video, we are going to cover the mock interview for Dinesh. He is having around 5 plus years of experience as a Java backend as well as front-end developer. So let's get started. Also, if you want to be a part of this interview series, just fill a form which is given in the description below. Add your details and we will reach ASAP to you. Also, we are thinking of starting a series where we are going to review your resume. So if you feel that your resume is not up to the mark and you want it to be reviewed, just let us know in the comment section. Also, there is a link given in the description below. You can add your resume and your details. We will also do a resume review for you guys. So there are two different forms. One form to be a part of this mock interview. One form where we are going to record a session where we are going to review your resume. And because we have received many resumes which are very good. So if you want any kind of review for your resume, just add your details in the that form and we will review that particular resume for you also. So let's get started now. Let's start our mock interview with Dinesh now. Hi Dinesh, how are you?
I'm very good. I'm doing very well actually. And how are you?
All good, all good. So before starting this mock, I can see that's a very nice background. So where are you right now and how is the weather around?
I'm basically right now in Canada. I mean, especially in
Awesome.
Montreal.
Awesome.
So it's bit snowing and bit cold here. Like currently it is -2. So it's a chilly
Oh,
weather. So
that's really nice to know. Chalo, let's get started. So can you please introduce yourself?
yeah, sure. My name's Dinesh and I'm from Canada and I'm basically from India. I moved here last 2 years back for my
Okay.
master's.
Okay.
And I finished my studies and I'm looking for the jobs now, especially in
Awesome.
software development field.
Awesome. That's awesome. So can you please briefly discuss about your tech stacks and projects?
Sure. So I have worked with Oracle in India for the tech
Okay.
stack of Java and Spring Boot
Okay.
for the web development applications. So after that, I moved here and I started working for this startup with the tech stack of React and Node.js. And recently, I did my internship with .NET. So it's like I have uh, so many tech stacks in my bag, but I always go with a Java. That's like my go-to language.
Good language.
But it's yeah,
Understood.
yeah. It's like the first language I choose whenever I give any coding test.
Awesome, awesome. So I can see that in the resume you have worked with front end as well as back end. So can you just give some insight about how Spring Security you have implemented from end to end, be it from front end to back end? How have you secured your application?
Yeah, sure. So generally, we enforce the security mainly on the backend itself because the client browsers is secured. Like we can have like multiple browsers running, but main thing which we have to ensure is our servers are running fine. So we generally go with some of the security features like JWT. Uh,
Nice.
because generally we go with HTTP, REST APIs. These are like stateless applications, which means like every time when you make a request, you don't know, you don't have any prehistories. So every time you have to authenticate, which is like a
Correct.
burden. So we use JWT uh, to enhance the performance. So where we make a hash out of the authentications, and so that we can authorize the user for the next time. So this is how we
Nice.
implement in the backend. And in the front end, we're going to pass the same JWT token for every time in the cookies or a session so that backend can read out. And yeah, it also comes with something called TTL, like time to leave. So it means like there is a shell life of like few minutes or seconds. So once it's done, it's re-authenticate.
Okay. And there comes the concept of refresh tokens when the expiry comes.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
And for what kind of authorization servers have you used for your tokens to getting your refresh and access tokens?
Uh, I generally used Okta OAuth 2.0. That's I think that's one of the popularly getting used
Yes.
authentication and authorization tool.
Perfect.
So and it's Spring also comes with a Spring security, which I prefer like also written on top of this. So this is the main
Correct.
thing which I have used.
Correct. I agree that Okta you have used as authorization servers, and Spring Security is something which properly integrates with the Okta parts. So yes, completely agree on that front. Now my question is that how from where did you hit Okta? So usually Okta comes with a page that gives you a page where you have to put user ID passwords, and then he will give you the access tokens which will store in your sessions and all those things. Agreed. So how the complete flows from which place you hit the URL, you do the authentication, for how authorization is done with Okta, what are roles, grant types. I would like to deep dive a bit if you are okay with it.
Yeah, sure. I think when we make an account in Okta, so generally we get the API key or access key, which and also like callback URLs. So generally the callback URLs could be like once the authentication success. So what could be the redirecting URLs? So we generally give our own application endpoints. So once the
Okay.
authentication success. So and we use that API key in our application so that whenever client make a request, so first we can hit to the Okta servers and it authenticate itself. So these authentication could be like our own web username and password authentication, or it could be any social logins. It could be Facebook or uh, Google login or LinkedIn. So once the authentication is done, so it will redirect to our application along with the access token. So based on the access tokens, it will have it's called authorizations, where like based on the user limitations, so only that kind of like accessibility we will give. So that helps to like limit the user security at the server side.
Okay. So basically, what you do is from the front end, you hit the Okta.
Yes.
That's how for the
Yes.
authentication part. Get the access token. With that access token, you hit the backend. That's how.
Yes. Uh, we can also have a like a transparency from the front end to directly Okta. Like we can have our own web layers in between, which will hit get first, and that will hit the Okta. So there are two way,
Okay.
but I would go with like the second one.
Now suppose there's an unethical hacker sitting in between trying to access your backend application. So how would you make sure that the token that he is giving is a justified token? So how do you make sure that the token is right?
So the token what it's getting generated, is based on some hashing algorithms. It means it's a one way, like based on that hash code. If I just use JWT, which can if we hash back it, like we can get like three part out of it. So I think one of the part is signature, which is just to authenticate whether this hash is corrupted or someone like
Hacked it up.
changed it or not, hacked it or not. Uh, but in our case, if let's assume like if everything is fine, but the in between part indicates like the actual part. It could be like a pass. It could be password or some authentication IDs, which actually we save it in the database. And once we get back this part, we check with the database to ensure like is corresponding is matching or not.
And
So
how
if
do
it
you
matching, it
validate?
means
Sorry. I'm
yes.
sorry.
No, it's fine.
Okay, I was curious to know how do you validate that token at the backend?
So yeah, once we get back the middle part of the JWT, so which is which holding the user information, so we check it in the database whether the password or some authenticated ID is matching. So if it's matching, it means like the user is the actual user. So that's how we ensure like the user is actually uh, the one trusted user or someone who is hacking.
Okay, but the
Even though
problem
the
is
hash
that
code looks the same, but when we uh, hash it back to the actual word, so it means like it's not always give the same value. So that's the thing.
okay, but it's always said that claims the middle part, the body part, should not have the passwords and everything. Otherwise, they can be easily decrypted because JWT token is just an encryption. You can even go to jwt.io and decrypt it. So having password there will reveal your password to hackers.
No, I think it works based on like a hashing is only like a one way of it's called like a one way like mapping. It means like from the keywords we can get to know like what's the hash code, but other way can't be possible. So you can't get to know the actual password. Sorry, I said password, but you can't get to know the password. So generally,
Okay.
anyone can get to know. Only the user know his own passwords. So when we
Okay.
save it in the database, so it's always be the hashing. So we never save the password directly in the tables.
Correct. So whenever JWT token comes, you will never have your passwords and any personal information in the body, because it is easily viewable by even by JWT.io. You just paste your token and decrypt it, and you will be able to see everything you have in the body. So correct on that front. You can have never have the sensitive information in your body part. Agreed.
Yes.
Nice. Sounds good to me. Also, now I can see that you have implemented schedulers in your application. So my question now is that what kind of scheduler you have implemented, and suppose that scheduler is being implemented as a code in your application. That code is being deployed on multiple n instances on cloud, and suppose 3 instances on cloud. So it will run thrice, and suppose that particular scheduler adds a record in the database, for example id 1 named Dinesh at 12 o'clock. So I'll have at the end 3 entries in database, rather I should have just 1 entry. So how to prevent that particular scenario? Any clue?
Yeah, I mean, generally we go with the Spring scheduler, but the drawback, as you mentioned, if there are multiple instances, the Spring scheduler can't able to handle this instance. It end up with running on all the 3 instances. So we want something like a singleton behavior here. Like for that, we can go with something called a Schedular. So how it orchestrate is like, rather than it will let it to run only once, and rather for all the instances. So that's how internal architectures are working.
Perfect. Sounds great. I can see that you have implemented caching also in your application. So how did you implement caching?
So the caching generally, either we can use the third party which is already available. So which is like Redis is one of the popular caching it's nowadays which we use to enhance the performance. There are few datas which we find like frequently are getting used. So rather than hitting the database, which takes some additional time as a latency, so we can use this caching, which is like in-memory key value mappings. So generally what happens, like whenever our request comes to the server first check it in the caches. So if it is there in the cache, it will get it. If it is not there, then it make a database hit to get the data.
Okay, you told me something about in-memory caching. So in-memory caching is what is in-memory cache?
So generally what happens, like database could be on the same servers or it could be under some other servers. When we go with the cloud applications, sometimes the database could be on running in some other server to make the application more resilient. So there is no problem. The thing what might happen could be the latency, because sometimes if the database is residing in the server which is far from our application servers, so there could be a delay. So in that case, what we can do is like on the same server where the application is running, we can have like a temporary memories. So where we keep the data, which for the fractional time, like there is something called TTL along with these data. Or if something got updated in the main database, then it will make it as dirty and rewrite the data back, so that at least user can see the up-to-date data in a fast time.
Nice. So I agree that there can be a chance of dirty read till the particular TTL, if that is not reached and that thing is updated. So how you prevent dirty reads? Either you keep the time very short. Then what will happen if the time to leave is very short? Again, a lot of database calls is going in and cache is of no use. But if time to live is long enough, you can have a chances of dirty read. So any possible ways how you can prevent this dirty read with caching?
So generally for the server, it can't get to know whether the data is dirty read or not, because only the database has a clear idea whether this data was corrupted. So there could be a chances of reading this dirty data, but this kind of data, we keep this kind of data especially for the applications like where some data need not to be accurate. Like for example, if you use Twitter, so we don't want like what I see on my page is need not to be like as accurate as yours. So when we can compromise on the consistency, we can go with like this kind of data, caching, I would say. But if it's highly financial, then I would say dirty read can't be something which we can compromise, because we don't want to see like the account balance something inaccurate on the 2 different accounts.
Correct. So, okay, I agree that you can use this caching mechanism only when there is some kind of eventual consistency is okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good way of saying the eventual consistency.
Perfect. Sounds great to me. Nice. So, any Hibernate caching you have implemented or the Redis one?
Yeah, I mean, if you use the JPA family for the ORM tools, so it could be either Hibernate or Eclipse Link. There are different implementations available. The JPA itself supports something called entity managers and entity level caching. But if you use Hibernate, we can also have a like level two, level one and level two cachings, which is like a session caching and also session factory cachings. So one is for the particular instance of the session. Other one is like session factory, like all the sessions will have a same caching technique. So this helps us to like get the entities in a very fast way rather than getting every time from the database level.
Perfect, and that reduces the latency. Nice. So
Yes.
there are two level of caching. You said the first level caching and second level caching. So which is associated with session, which is associated with session factory, and which is by default enabled, and which you have to enable explicitly. Any clue on that?
Yes. So session level is called L1 caching, and session factory is the L2. So by default, we enable the session level caching, which is like limited to particular session. So, but if you want some data which should be like could be cached across all the sessions, then we put it in the L2 level caching, which is under the session factory.
Perfect.
Because generally we create the session from the session factory, so all the sessions are like inherit the same caching of the session factories.
Perfect. So even if the cache session is closed, your data is still cached.
Yes, yes. Even though one session is closed, still the data will be there in the session factory, which is the L2.
Perfect. So it's always said that session factory should always be singleton. Any reason why it is asked to be singleton and only one instance should be there? Why?
Uh, as the name indicates, singleton, like first thing is like it's a costly operation, I would say, but I mean in normal words, this as same as like creating the instance of the database. So we generally want it to be like highly synchronized applications, so that no two interactions can corrupt the data. So when we make it as singleton, so that every time every new sessions will use the same every new creations will create the only one instance, and it will get reused for the all the upcoming requirements.
Perfect. So basically one connection to DB. Nice.
Yes.
Now suppose I have MySQL DB, I have Oracle DB, and I have suppose PostgreDB. Three DBs for my one application. So how many session factories will be created for these?
So it's generally like maybe 3 sessions factory it can be created, but for one up, I mean particular to one database, because like each and every database has its own like isolation level and consistency. It can vary from database engine of that database.
Perfect. Yeah, session factory can be like configured database specifically. So you
Yes.
have to give the URLs, you have to give the passwords, usernames. That can differ for all the three. So session factory to create a connection to database for three different database, you have three different session factories. Perfect on that front. Also, I can see that you have used GraphQL. So why GraphQL? Why not REST API? What was a scenario where you were forced to go to GraphQL? For what reasons?
Generally, it's not a limitation of the REST API. It's just like when we go with the REST API, there are so many endpoints come into picture. Like it's very hard for the any client applications or any like third party to remember this. So, like for example, if I have like a student as the main entity, and if you have like all the CRUD operation, then like it end up with like so many endpoints for student tables, and similarly for like account, again like so many endpoints. To avoid this, we go with the concept of GraphQL. Like there will be like only one endpoint which can take the like one endpoint, but it can take the payload in such a way that it can handle internally in a very specific manner. So
Okay.
that's one of the main reason we go with GraphQL. Uh, but yeah, it's up to the implementer, like what kind of which ones to go with. So generally, it's up to the team to decide whether the REST API or a GraphQL.
Okay, so what scenarios you faced because of which you choose GraphQL over REST API? Because I can see that you have worked on both, so there must be clear
Yeah.
distinguishing. You can see that why you have used this.
Yeah, sure. So, so generally we call like fine grain and coarse grain kind of like applications. Generally, the REST APIs are the one we will fall under like something called coarse grain, I guess, where like there will be like joins between the multiple entities, and uh, you don't have to pass all the details when you make a REST calls, like calls. So in that case, I would say like keep it in the REST API. But if you have like to avoid so many joins, if you want to send the data in like a single payload request and perform different operations on different entities, so I prefer to go with GraphQL.
Okay. Also, there is some differences in the responses also. So, suppose in the response, I do not want all the fields in the response for a particular. Suppose I have an entity employee. I have hundreds of fields there. I just want the ID and the name. Then that partial response, can it be sent with REST API or can it only be sent with the graph? Something, there is a difference with the responses also, right? Only
Uh,
particular field selection is returned with the GraphQL.
we can also limit in the REST API as well based on like what
Okay.
kind of DTO we are returning.
Oh.
Because like yeah, I didn't go in depth about this, but in the REST API also we can limit what response we are responding back. We also come up with
I
something called
agree.
JSON ignore, and yeah, some crucial fields if you don't want to we don't want to export, we can @annotate with JSON ignore.
Ignore.
So yeah, but I feel like it's still like too much of laborious task to do this using REST API, which can be easily automated with the GraphQL.
Correct, correct. ठीक है. I can see that yes, there are high advantages of GraphQL over REST APIs. So yeah, one of this is that you can have only partial responses sent rather than the complete DTO in because if the user wants that I want name, then you can give
Yes.
name. But if you make it with DTO, it is hard coded in your Pojo. That is,
Yes.
if it is 100 fields, you are just sending ID and name. Now, suppose I am a different kind of user, I would ask you to have the salary also. Then, will you change the Pojo? You can do the source code changes, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So, what I want, I will ask you that just give me that. That can be done with GraphQL. That cannot be done with REST API because the source code changes has to be done, which is very bad. So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
what I
That's
find as a advantage of GraphQL among multiples. But yeah,
yes.
that's the one scenario I might have worked with. But fine. Next, I would ask you that I can see that you have done some external configurations with your Spring Boot application also. So how did you make those external configurations in Spring Boot app?
I mean, could you add it more details? Like when you say external configurations.
Okay, understood. So they are properties files, right? There's a property
Yes.
file and there is YAML files. So what you do is you put your properties and customizations to your Spring Boot applications through those files. So I can see that you have used both properties files and YAML. So what difference you found in both the properties and which is better and why?
Uh, actually, uh, much there is no difference. It's just like the way we write the files. The structure is different. The YAML is like yet another markup language, as the name indicate. So the main problem with like normal the property file, the application dot property, we use the dot structure. So the thing is like we have to keep on repeating the same prefix for every changes. For example, it has to be like server dot name, server dot port, like everything. But whereas in the YAML, we will write like a server as a main parent, and inside that we will write name and port as a child.
So
So
it's hierarchical.
the,
That's how.
yes, it's more hierarchical. Like yeah,
Okay.
there's another way called the JSON, but I think the popularly getting used is the YAML one. So, but functionality wise, there is no difference. It's just like structurally we write it in a better way so that to avoid repeating same keywords in the property files.
So I agree. Ki YAML is more readable than properties file. Also,
Yes.
you can use map list, those kind of data types which you cannot use with your
Uh,
properties file. It's everything is string in properties file. Agree. Agree.
yes. Yes.
Taken. Nice. I would go with microservices now. So,
Okay.
how did you handle distributed transactions in your microservices?
Uh, so when it comes to distributed transactions, it's easy to handle that in the monolith architecture because we can have one transaction and write operations we want to perform. But in case of distributed, we bifurcate the functionality into different microservice. The main problem is if something goes wrong, then we have to roll back. But since it is under in different transactions, we have I think, two-way of approach. So whether we can go with synchronized or asynchronized. I think the commonly getting used is asynchronized Saga patterns. Uh, I can elaborate on that. There is one more approach called synchronized way, which is like 2PC or two-phase commit approach. The main advantage of Saga is, like as I said, is asynchronous way, so that uh, your client need to have to wait for the others to give back the respond or acknowledgement. So here, like each and every transaction is divided as Saga, and the main job of it is like it ensure its own transaction is getting executed, and also once it's done, it will trigger an event so that next transaction can begins. And if something goes wrong, it will. There is nothing called rollback, because since these are working in a multiple different microservice, so it will send a revert command where we have to do the revert of the database changes.
Perfect. Can you please design an e-commerce site for me? Just a very high overview, like what components will be there, how interactions will be there, what kind of interactions will be there, what kind of database we will use. Can we do that?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'll just share my screen. So Dinesh, can you, this is a collaboration tool. Here we can both collaborate and have a work. So can you please design an e-commerce website, what overall components you can have, and how they can interact with each other, what database, what type of databases they can have. So basically very high level overview of e-commerce will be good for me.
Sure. So generally we say the e-commerce, I would take either Flipkart or Amazon as an example here. So if I get this kind of questions, first I would think what could be the functional requirement and what are non-functional requirement, because functional requirement is something like a business team or some customer would specify what kind of requirements we want. So in the e-commerce, first thing is like I don't go in depth about like login platform and everything, because I will concentrate more on the main part here, which is like a homepage where I can see all the items, and I can add I can also have a search functionality and add to cart and the payment. So these are like a main area which I would consider as a functional requirement. And when it comes to non-functional requirement, I would think about scalability, so that because there could be millions of users are accessing this application in a same time. So I have to ensure that my application is more resilient. It shouldn't be it should respond so that it won't get down or anything in any fraction of time. And latency has to be reduced. It means like I can't wait forever to get the response for any of my bookings. So yeah, these are my main area of interest. So okay.
So what I have done is I have made both. So if you want to put notes, you can put in the left side, and you can draw in the right side. And you can also do that if you want to put notes in this both, or else if you just want to draw, you can use canvas. So anything if you're forgetting, so what I'll do is I'll put some requirements for you. The way you said, you can have functional and non-functional requirements. Perfect on that. So what I want is, functionally, being a client, I would say that I would have the functionality of, I'll put the functionality here so that it will be easier for you.
Sure.
I need the functional things that I should be able to search product. Then I should be able to add to cart. Then place an order. Then assign a delivery partner. Track my product, and at the end send email notifications. For every change in order status. Anything else do we do with e-commerce? No, right? Now.
No, I think.
Okay. Now coming to non-functional ones, I would say I would require you to handle load during sale time. Sorry. And I would say balance. Also, I would say that how to prevent system from spam hits. How can we do that? Because being an unethical user, what I can do is that I can put hundreds of requests,
Yes.
like search this, search this, search this. How would you prevent n number of hits to your legitimate system? Being a hacker, I can do
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
that you can handle. Also, during peak hours, you can scale it. How would you do that? And as you go ahead with the drawing and components, I can add more as and when required. So this is my functional and non-functional requirements. I can go to canvas now. You can come back and see your functional and non-functional requirements back when you click on both. So you can go ahead and we can collaborate over this particular problem.
So yeah, based on this functional requirement, yeah, I will start a simple design first, then I'll keep on add the enhancement based on the
Sure.
non-functionality as well. So yeah, generally we have a client. Here client could be either like a mobile, or it could be web, or any
Browser.
lab. Yeah, this has to be like a responsive web screen, so that every different resolution can see that uh, HTML page in a clear way. And
Perfect.
there could be many users, because since we are talking about the e-commerce website, so we can come up with like millions of user in a we call that as like a daily active users. So based on that, we have to decide like how many replica of the servers we want, and how we are calling those servers. So for that, we generally go with something with a load balancer here. So um, I generally write it as client, and if load yeah, it's a load balancer. uh, I also want this has to be like a proxy, so we can use something called Nginx, which acts as both load balancer and also proxy. And other thing mentioned in the non-functional requirement is something called like spam hits. So we can use something called as limit handlers. Like it will keep track of like how many requests are coming from like same IP address. So if it find it like if the number of requests is miscellaneous, like it's not something it's like an active user request, in that case we can it will like stop the user to hit that part. So which we call that as,
Rate limiters?
yeah, rate limiters. That's what, sorry, that's what I was trying to say.
No problem. Understood. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I don't have any filter kind of icons, so I would have used that here. So
Okay. No problem.
um,
Go ahead with what you're
rate
doing.
limiter. Okay, so then we have like different kind of like so after this we have a web service which will take the request from our load balancers. So the load balancer will choose like which instance of the service we have to call. So we have a web APIs, and uh, search service. um, uh, I'll write the rest of the service soon. I just want to go with one
Sure.
by one.
Sure, sure, sure.
So
No
when
problem.
we say search, it also good if you also include something called as a caching. So we can add some Redis cache for the search service.
Okay.
So this generally cache the data, like all the items which are coming from the inventories. So this data need not to be accurate. Like sometimes we can search the product, but even though if you don't available in the car in the inventory, so this need not to be like 100% consistent. It can be like eventual consistency as well. So
Okay.
that's totally fine. So
Okay.
and generally we can go with the database here. Uh, of NoSQL or SQL, but I was thinking since the items could be like different of schema structure, so we can have a something NoSQL. So it depends on like what kind of cloud service we are using. If we are using, we can go with the Cassandra or MongoDB. It's up to. I mean, there's no problem, but it's just like if you use Cassandra, it's provide eventual consistency. So I will go with the Cassandra here.
Okay.
So
So basically, we're going with NoSQL for search service.
yeah, NoSQL. So it
Okay.
can be, yeah, it's need not be like NoSQL, but I find it here more relevant as a Cassandra.
I agree. Perfect.
Uh, I write it as NoSQL
Okay.
here. So mm, the search product, and we can also, since it's a search, we can also include the AWS Elasticsearch features, so that the data, I mean, search features can be very fast. So we can have a Elasticsearch in between.
Nice.
Um, so so in case of my search, like whenever users search in the search area, so search will first comes to the load balancer. So based on, I can have multiple replica of my search service. It's like a microservice.
Okay.
So there are multiple instances. So based on the load balancer will choose one of them search service which is available at that instance, and send
Okay.
the request. So
Okay.
generally how it works is like based on the keyword, and it will match, it can use any one of the algorithms, like there are different algorithms available, but yeah, the one which is efficient, we can you go with that. uh,
Okay.
Elastic.
Yeah, I understood. No worries. I understood
Okay,
that.
so yeah, generally for this it will work based on the what are the data which is available in our database. So we have all dump all the data in our NoSQL, and our Elasticsearch will, uh, I mean, query these NoSQL and index those data based on the keywords, because user can search in a different criteria, and there could be typo as well. Like, I mean, it's not like every search I mean, query has to be correct spelling. So that our application can understand those keywords and also still has to figure it out. So that's where our Elasticsearch will come into pictures to make it more uh, efficient way of searching. So
Okay.
this is pretty much I use for the search. And for the cart features, I also use the Redis here. This is for like some keep the search already criteria in my caching, so that if user is, we may know like sometimes what is a commonly top search items, so we can keep that in the Redis cache, so that we can first get those data from cache, then if it's not there, then it from our main service.
Okay.
And so that's fine. And add to the cart is also here. So these services are like multiple replica, so more than one instance are available. So in the add to the cart service, like when user add to the cart, it means like it has to be like a map. So I generally like map between like this user and his all the items. So it could be like one to many mapping. So generally
Perfect.
if it's a mapping, uh, it could be debatable, but I can go with the SQL database. So here
Perfect.
it could be MySQL. MySQL is better suit, uh, because there is something called a CAP algorithm, which is called consistency, availability, and the uh, I forgot about the last one. It is
I
yeah.
understood.
So yeah. So in my case, I need complete consistency because and the availabilities. So that's the main reason. So that's the reason I go with the MySQL here. Uh,
Okay. Also, there has to be some relationships between your users, your
yes,
cart items. Okay.
yes, exactly. I did not mention few of the, I mean, main required users here. Like one is user we needed, and also items. Uh, those two also needed. But yeah, the card service generally will ensure that the mappings are happening correctly. So we need something which has a strong schema structure and also like efficient way of joining. So in that case, I go with SQL.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Uh, and add to cart. So place the order. So and these services has to talk each other for uh, because since it is a microservice, it doesn't have all the complete information. It just perform one single responsibility. So I can I mean, in the behind the picture, I can go with either REST template or fin client algorithms to communicate with the services. But
Okay.
when it comes to system design, I don't want to go in depth about the coding. But when it comes to place order, so when user place the order, assign it to delivery patterns. So here we have to use something called Saga design patterns, because these three things, I mean, placing the order, assign the delivery, and also payment. This has to be happens in kind of like a single transactions. So
I'll scroll down a bit. Is it okay if I reduce it to fit?
yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay. Go ahead.
Uh, okay, card service. So in the card service, I also put something called maybe in the place order. Uh, I use called Kafka here, because whenever we place the order, item has to get reduced from the inventory, and there is some periodic update has to be done so that next user won't get any problem of like ordering the same item, but eventually it will come up with like no items are available. So I need a Kafka here. Uh, so that once I place the order, I can update that in my inventory so that my NoSQL will get updated correct. So
I
this
have a
Kafka will be
question over this. So,
yeah,
when you place an order and you're putting it to Kafka, Kafka is a sync communication, right? It will be put to some topic.
yes,
Now, if you reduce it, if there's some lag because it is asynchronous communication, there is lag in picking up the topic, and by the same time, second user comes and will ask for the same product, but you have only one inventory of that particular product. So you didn't reduce
yes,
it.
yes.
So he will be able to place an order. You will be also be able to place an order, but you only have one stock. So that is a
Uh,
problem. So are you sure we can use Kafka for this food?
yeah, in that point, yeah, it could be end up with like inconsistence, because we can't have like two users like trying to access the product which is not available.
Correct.
So yeah,
So
maybe
I think
Kafka would be better
Kafka.
candidate for the notification part, I would
Yes.
say. But
Yes.
yeah, for the this point I missed out. Yeah, for the inconsistent behavior, I can't go with Kafka since it is
Perfect.
asynchronous.
Perfect.
So this has to be happens like in a sync way, so that there won't be any inconsistency.
Perfect.
So once we place the order, I will. This has to get communicate with the cart service so that I can see like what the items which are added to the cart, so that I can place. So
Also, there can be one
these,
inventory service who can manage inventories for a particular product.
yes, I think I mentioned, but I didn't add. I guess we need a inventories, so that any sales team, not sales team, any inventory teams, like for it could be any vendors, they can add the items to the uh,
Perfect.
yeah.
That's okay.
For
It
that we
will.
can,
That's okay. I understood. Ki you can have one more service. Uh, also, there would be one need for. Um, Suppose you have inventory with you, right? Now, after
yes,
placing this, you can also have one user service as well as one product service, because every vendor will add some product also.
Yes.
So it will be good to manage product as a different service so that it can help you to have a single responsibility principle followed. Each microservice will have its own product. Otherwise, each task would have to be done by cart service, but the task of cart service is to only manage your carts for a particular user. So I was just thinking to have these many microservices. Uh, you can go ahead with your
Yeah.
version. I'm okay with that also.
No, that would make sense. Like I was thinking, like this is like normal clients. We can also have like a
Okay.
vendors where they will have like a inventory service where they can like add these items, and this
Okay.
inventory service has a link to the NoSQL, so that
Perfect. Yeah.
these elements will get mapped.
Perfect. Okay. Okay.
And
It's a very big application to draw along, but whatever you're drawing is something which is very understandable. So that's fine. I'm good with it.
yeah, and for assigning the delivery partners, uh, yeah. So we also need a assign delivery partners. So we should have one more service to keep the keep like we need a table to keep like all the delivery partners which are available. So sorry. So I go with the SQL here because I mean I find it like all the delivery partners have like more structured data. So that's the main intention. So and like what kind of delivery they are providing. So all details will become under my SQL database. And when I assign, I also has to trigger the so generally the place the order service will call our assigned delivery partners to get the who can who can be assigned for delivering these items. So once this is done, there is one part is missing is the payment, because like yeah, it has to be get assigned to the delivery partner after the payment is done. But all these things has to be done in like a asset property. Generally, we can go with like a uh, could be a Saga design pattern or 2PC commit pattern, so that transactions has to be done either complete or has to get rolled back. So
I have a question on this, Dinesh.
yes,
So, I suppose if you use Saga, so it will not be having the atomic nature, right? Because atomic nature says do it at once. It should happen or completely should not happen. So when it comes to Saga, you place an order and
yeah,
you assign a delivery partner later on because an event is being generated. Now suppose your payment is failing, so you will do a rollback. Do not assign a delivery partner and make the order cancelled. So you
yes,
cannot maintain the asset property here end to end because uh, eventually you are rolling back, but at that time it's not happening. So asset properties are actually not getting followed with this particular Saga design pattern. Now also I have one more thing in my mind. When you are placing an order, so you do not need
okay,
the delivery partner to be assigned as soon as you are placing an order, right? You have placed your order. Whenever some delivery partner is available, then it will be assigned. So here I can agree that you can use Kafka.
yes,
You don't
Kafka,
need a
yes.
synchronous. I agree.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So
Okay.
it's yeah, it's mostly depends on how we want the use case. Yeah, if you, I think the
Yes.
one you mentioned is like a better use case. I don't need to assign delivery partner in a sync way. So in that
Correct.
case, I can once it is done, I will trigger a topics to my Kafka, so that my delivery partners like I can call like listening for these Kafka topics. So
Perfect.
so based on that, like any one delivery partner will get assigned based on the kind of like order is coming, and and it also get what kind of delivery partners should be assigned from this. So once this is done, I can use the same Kafka to trigger another notifications for the notification part. So we have a notification service, and this based on the user preference, like if user just want the SMS or if user want it to be email kind of notifications and everything, based on that we can have a I mean notification handlers. It could be SMS or it could be email, or it could be any other different way of intimating the
Communication.
users. Yes.
Perfect.
And there is one thing I've yet to write is something called uh, tracking the orders. Once the delivery partner is also assigned, user can track the orders. It's called like past histories. So this generally like so one part I missed out here is like
Just
once
a
the
second.
delivery partner is assigned. Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So once the delivery partner is assigned, we also keep some log data. It could be like AWS S3 instance. So it could be for the logs. So this help us to like keeping the track of like what is going wrong, and also what kind of items we can bring into the e-commerce website in the future. Like let's say like some items is getting sold out very well, so we can have some analytic tool on top of this. It could be like Apache Spark or something, and then we can decide like, okay, we can have these kind of items in our inventory in our future, uh, something like
Understood.
that, or something we can add a discount or something, which we see it on like on every holidays. uh, and for the tracking the product, so once the delivery partner is also assigned, so we can have like a same Kafka notifications, which help us to like put an entry in our a table, which help us to track the items.
Okay.
It could be since I said items are like could be in any different structure, I can keep it as NoSQL here also. So this generally like contain the historical data in a chronological order, like and also like there will be a flag which says like whether it is delivered or not. So that help us to like keep track of like whether the item is delivered, and I mean corresponding checkpoint whether it is dispatched, and or it is got assigned to nearest service something. So that helps the user to keep track of where exactly the items are getting.
Okay, so just to show the tracking part, what do you think that you are going to show it in your system? I think it will be just the time, it will be the place where it is, and the product. That's it, right? So I think, is it not more of the structured data, just the type of value into that particular column is changing? Is it?
Uh, yeah, I mean that makes sense because like I chose NoSQL because I thought I'll keep the record of the item, but I think I already have it here, so I don't need to. I already have it here, so I don't have to
Yeah,
keep it
you can
as a
just keep it
duplicate.
a clickable and
Yes,
navigate to your product service where the product
yes,
description is already there. Sounds good to me. Yes, SQL looks good, better to me. I agree.
yes, yes. Here I need to keep track
Perfect.
of like at what is the timestamp, whether it is delivered or not, and uh, who is ball in code, like whether it is still with the dispatcher
Perfect.
or whether it is with a vendor or something.
Perfect.
So
Perfect.
so once the item is delivered, the delivery person will get the confirmation from the user, and it will trigger I mean it can be asynchronous, like it can trigger a topics to our Kafka, and Kafka will mark the item as delivered in our track records, because it need not be like immediate operations, like you will see the update
Agree.
immediately on your database.
Agree.
So this help us to something to do it in the background in a performance benefit way.
Perfect. Sounds great to me. Uh, this system is very good for me. I agree. This is good. Now I have a query that now suppose I have my one of the application. Say suppose um, my order service is
Okay.
fetching some data for my orders table. Now it's a huge data, and I see that there is some performance issue. The SQL query or the query is taking loads of time for fetching. So how do you
Okay.
optimize that front? How do you optimize your queries?
So the first thing is like I need to figure it out what is why it is taking time. So a couple of reasons could be possible. One is if the query is taking time because it lack with the indexing, then it's better we can add an index, because indexing is nothing but a some kind of data structure we use to get the items in a fast way. So
Okay.
so that's the first thing I will check. I mean it's called analyzing the query. are profiling the query. So get to know whether if it's a query issue. If assume it's not a query issue, but if my database is getting very huge, then we can have like something called partitioning. It could be there are two way. One is partitioning, other one is sharding. Generally, these e-commerce website could be a location based. Like we go with there is no difference between much in the sharding and partitioning, but the main difference is sharding means like we keep the uh, database in a different servers. Like it's like a same table, but we keep it in a different places. Whereas like in partitioning, it comes under the same servers, but the replica, not replica, like the partitioning happens in the same servers.
Okay.
So since the e-commerce can be one in US, one in India and everything, so we can have a sharding concept. We can keep the data which is local to the particular place. That's the reason we have like Amazon dot in Amazon dot US. So this help us to like have a like logical level of uh, keeping the datas.
Perfect.
And yeah, I think if it's related to the database, that's the immediate workaround I would figure it out.
So you have fine-tuned your SQL queries. Fine.
Yes.
Now suppose there is a Kafka topic, and Kafka
Okay.
topic is facing some lags. So how do you remove those lags in that particular topic? Any clue on that
Uh,
front?
so generally, Kafka comes with like a resilient. It's one of the resilient feature of the Kafka is like if anything goes wrong or like if something is going failures, Kafka works in a concept of like multiple brokers. So there will be like leaders and other one is like followers or worker brokers. So, but your question is like if something happens wrong, then how it rectify it, right?
Correct. So suppose there are multiple consumers. They are reading from this. Now suppose there are multiple messages which are left to be read. So there is a lag in the topic. So any
Okay.
it's very border case. It's very corner case. If you have worked upon it, then only we will be able to answer. So it's very corner case. So have you worked upon clearing the lags in the topic?
No, actually, I mean, one
That's
thing is like, okay,
That's okay. Because it's very
oh,
corner case. I was just thinking if you got a chance to work upon it or not. Because it's very similar to like, you might not get a chance to work upon garbage collection things every time in working with a
yes,
Java application. So it's very corner case. That's completely fine. This system looks good to me. Thank you so much for this much input for creating a complete e-commerce. There are n things you can add also, you can improve also. But for me, this is good.
yeah,
I
there is
like
one
this
thing
part.
we could also add it is something called
Yeah.
CDN, generally to keep the static data. The thing what I'm thinking about is like there are images and also few datas which are like same. Like for example, if you're booking for pen, I mean, it's like a common image which we can show. So we can use something called CDN. It generally comes like a web symbol. I think there are popular CDNs available like Alchemine and Cloudflare. There are like popular ones where which keep the data geographically across the endpoint so that it can hit the nearest CDN to get those images.
Perfect.
So this really needed when the items are added to the cart. So we can keep those images and static data or static HTMLs in there so that you don't have to hit the server to get those data.
Correct. So this is when your application is geographically located. Agreed.
Yes.
Perfect. Any more inputs you want to put to this?
Yes. I think I also mentioned about analytics here,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
help
Yeah.
us to like enhance our application. And yeah, the one thing you mentioned is about like how we handle the scaling during high sale time, like especially during holidays or Diwali. So generally, we if you use the cloud service applications, it also comes with something called alerting features. It track the logs and we can have like some kind of like a threshold. So if it's exceeding our CPU utilized like more than this, it automatically scan the servers. Or if it's going below than that, then it will also like reduce the number of instances of the servers. So this help us to like orchestrate in a dynamic way rather than like hard coding number of servers we want for the applications.
Perfect. Sounds great. Okay. I think I'm good with this question now. I would ask one more thing. I have one question on the search service part. Now, search service is going to show you all products, right? So, uh, since you have worked both on front end and back end, can you give me some idea how you can add the paginations to your n number of products you are getting on the page? So, database can have thousands of products. Also, your front
Yes.
end can show that. So, how pagination works for both?
Sure. So, okay, yeah. So there is two different way. One is like lazy loading of the data. Like we can load in a bulk manner. Like first we load only like 100, then we keep on load. Other one is something called infinite scrolling, which is like when you scroll up on the page, whenever it hints, when the scroll hit the end of your viewport, it will make a call to a database by sending the next page number to the backend, so that our query will fetch the next 100 records starting from that particular batch size. So this is the efficient way to avoid loading all the data on the page, even though we can't show all the data in a easy way. So this is called like yeah, one is called lazy loading of data, other one is infinite scrolling.
Okay,
And
so
we
I that
also
is the
include,
front end part, right? Because
no, no,
when you
that's, yes, yes. uh, yeah, that's the front end part. Like the way we trigger it, we decided in the front end, but the pagination and also like loading the data in a chunk is something we can tune it in the SQL queries.
perfect. So at the backend, how did you do it with the batch operation? That's how.
Yes, we specify like next batch numbers, and I mean what could be the next record ID. I mean this is something logically we can do. Like I think I'm not sure exactly with the query, but I use the JPA methods which we can specify with our entity manager. Like what's next next batch number and what could be the size of the next batch.
Okay, okay. So batch is what you have used for the pagination at backend, and for front end,
Yes.
how you have mentioned the pagination is using the infinite. The whenever the end is hit, that's how you scroll. And my question over here is that during pagination, when you scroll down, when you hit the
Yes.
end, you send a request to backend process it, gives you data, so there will be a lag in between, right?
Yes.
So how do you manage that lag?
Uh, I mean, generally the pages, it's, I mean, when we say like it hit the end, it need not be like hit the end spot of a page. It means like the client's code is written in efficient way. Like when it tried to figure it out when we're going close to the end, it automatically make the call. So it's not like at the end, it will like just before the end, so that user won't feel there is uh,
Lag.
a lag, yeah, actually. But it could be
Perfect.
possible there could be a lag. We show but spinners or responsive web pages where you can see something called like a gray color, like kind of like a buzzing screen. Then it will get replaced with the actual data.
Perfect. Perfect. Sounds great. Um. Okay.
And also we add something called throttling or a debouncing concept, so that user, I mean, we don't make a search for every single character we type. So we only make the search when user give up the when we user keep the key away from the keyboard. In that case only we make the search. So this will avoid making unnecessary queries for every type we do.
Perfect. Perfect. Sounds great. Okay. I think I'm good with this. I'll switch back now.
Okay.
Perfect. Now we are back, Dinesh. So I'll start with the another part. If you're comfortable with CI/CD and Git, can I go ahead with that?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay. So, what branching technique you have used for your project, and how you people collaborate with each other?
Sure. So we generally use the Git for the versioning control, and generally we have like a dev branches and QA, and uh, yeah, generally we have like a master branch, which is we also call like a stable branch, and for every monthly releases we create a new branch from that. It depends on how many, what's the scale of our team. So if there are many team members in the team, so in that case we also consider it called a feature branch, which so once the changes are done on the feature, so we will do a kind of like a testing. So this will get deployed on the testing environment. So first, developer will do their own testing by following all the test cases. If everything looks fine for the developer and also the automation cases are running fine, in that case, we deploy the same branch on the testing environments. So once the QLs also test, we merge this to our pre-prod branch. It's not directly merged to the stable. So in the pre-prod branch, it looks like a same production branch, like it, but customers are not using that changes. This will just to ensure that our changes are working fine in the customer environment. Once everything is looks fine, then we deploy it on the production.
Perfect. So, as soon as you merge your code to a particular branch, say dev or your pre-prod or prod, how is your code is getting deployed to that particular environment?
It's generally called like profiling. Like generally, we specify what kind of environment we are running. So based on that particular profile file, if I just want to explain with the Spring Boot, we have uh, application dot property files. Generally, that's like a default file we use, but we can also have something called application dev, application prod, application staging. So based on the environment, these file will used and it will override the settings of the existing one. So for example, for my local, I will use my local DB, but for the QA, we will use some other DB. So these changes we will write in the corresponding property file, which will get overridden by the property files.
Okay, but then my question is regarding the deployment part. So,
Okay.
yeah, as soon as you merge it, you raise a PR, you merge it to a particular branch. How is that code deployed to particular environment?
Okay. So generally, uh, okay, the Git automatically it depends on what kind of environment we're using for the deployment. It could be GitHub Action or it could be Jenkins. So generally, it will uh, check periodic changes are available. So that's the reason we use like continuous integrations and deployment, continuous deployment. So this to ensure that uh, every changes has to get deployed as soon as the new changes come into picture. So it automatically see if there is any change in the commit IDs. If it figure it out, then it automatically start to run the continuous to run the test cases. Then it will automatically deploy the changes.
Okay, understood. So, you talked about CI and CD. So, can you explain about each of them and what tools you have used for CI, what tools you have used for CD, and what are
Uh,
if you use Jenkins, what are the build stages?
Sure. So, as the name indicates, CI is the continuous integration and continuous deployments for the CD. So, when you say continuous integration, means like generally I write my code so that I mean I also write something called JUnit so that my codes are more unit test case based, and we could also follow some TTD patterns so ensure that our codes are more robust. But once the changes is done, we have to integrate with the other component as well to find it whether it's working fine. So that's where our CI come into picture. So instead of getting the failures in a big chunk in the end moment, so what we do is like every commit we do, it will trigger the continuous or integration test suite, which will do some crude of like a crude operations as automation cases. So if anything goes wrong, it will block ourselves from the further deployment so that we can fix that. So that's where the CI come into picture. So I generally write the JUnit test cases and also Seleniums. It's up to the team which kind of testing automation has to go with. So yeah, once the every continuous is running fine, then it will go for the deployment. So it's the same thing whenever it notices the change in the commit ID, so it automatically start to deploy. It will create a jar file out of it. It depends on how we are orchestrating the system. If you go with the container based structure like Dockers or something, so it will create a new image out of it, and these image will create a new containers from these images, and it will get deployed. So yes.
Agreed. So, you have used Docker for your containerization, right?
Yes, yes,
So, you might have written some Docker files also and images
yes,
too.
yes. So in our same project, we can have something called Docker files, which have like bunch of instruction. So it could be like what could be our JDK portion, and I mean, yeah, what could be our entry point and what are the ports should be enabled. So these like a bunch of instruction helps the Dockers to inst- install these kind of packages and execute the jar files.
Okay. So basically, your Docker container that would have everything, every library, everything that you need for your running on your instances. Now, suppose you
Yes.
the previous example, the e-cart, you will have like minimum of 10 of your microservices. So 10 containers would be running. So how do you manage those containers on production?
Uh, yeah, it's a good question. So generally, we use popularly Kubernetes for the orchestration as a tool. So generally, this the job of the Kubernetes is like scaling of these containers. So we can push or commit our images to our GitHub cloud, and we can make it like very automated with our Kubernetes, so that whenever it sees like there is some overhead in the services, it can create a new instance from our container. So from our image, sorry, from the image it will create a new containers, or if something is not getting used, then it will can do the reverse way. So
Okay, okay. So you will use Kubernetes for your maintaining of your pods on the
yes.
production. So suppose one of the pod is crashing, it is a task of Kubernetes to restart the pod with a different instance. Agreed.
Yes.
So Kubernetes is one thing you can use for production. Now suppose I have something wrong with my production, so you must get yourself alerted that yes, even though your Kubernetes is trying to restart your pod, but it is a loopback crash. That is a situation when it is trying multiple times to restart your application, but it is not able to. That is loopback crash. So how do
Yeah.
you handle those situations?
So generally the developer will get pager duty call sometimes if the periodic fail happens. So we can still smart these alerts, so think like something which can control or something which we can't. For example, if something is a MySQL is going down, which is something which we can't control, so that we can't do anything until the database team has to fix. But if server is going crash and our Kubernetes is can't able to get it up, the worst case is we have to manually bring this up. uh, but I never encountered the case where we used any automation tool to get it more resilient, uh,
Okay.
apart from Kubernetes.
Agreed, agreed. So yes, manual intervention can help you in such cases
Yes.
where, or else your logs will help you. So in the Kubernetes, you have many tools like Rancher and all, where you can see the logs, why your particular application is not able to get up, and if you have
Yes.
something deployed recently, and that is making your application crash again and again, you can revert it back. So,
Yes.
how did you make your versioning and how do you roll back? So every time it happens in our life, right? Every time on the production, your code will not happen like it will work seamlessly. So how do you revert and roll back? What is your strategy to roll back?
So generally, when we create the uh, new instances of the Docker, so we also give something called versioning. So it's like a namespace followed by name and the version. So it means like the Kubernetes have the versioning of our of the image. So it means if last version is not working fine, so it automatically goes to the previous one and create a new instance out of it. So sorry, new container out of that image. So
How will he roll back?
uh, so okay, so we have a images with the version numbers. So it means like Kubernetes will have those in a historical way, so which is the latest
Okay.
and which is the previous one. So if the latest one is not working fine, then it try sometimes. If it's not going, then it maybe feel like it can try with the previous one, and it will check the previous one and it will create a new container out of that image. It's generally
Okay.
how we do with the Git as well. Like if the our latest is not working fine, then we go with the previous versions and create a new branch,
So
something.
that is a manual intervention you do?
No, no, no. It's something which could be automated with the Kubernetes, if I'm not wrong.
Okay.
But in
Okay.
the worst case, we can manually do that as well.
Understood. Okay. Okay. So
Because that's
you
where our like Terraform or like infra as a service come into picture. Like where rather than we do it manually, we can use this kind of like uh, I work with Pulumi, which is like a Terraform similar, but yeah, which can work as an infra as a service, like where we can orchestrate the infrastructure.
Understood. So, what all infrastructures have you orchestrated with Pulumi?
Uh, I mean, I worked with Azure, so the B2C is the one like we use it very heavily for the authentications, and I've really worked on the alert partings where we can trigger the alerts in a efficient way whenever something goes wrong. So these two, I worked and I made it bit automated with the help of the Pulumi. It's generally written in YAML file. It's not like any other coding knowledge is required. It's just mainly a property file with like bunch of instructions. So yeah, that's pretty
So basically,
much.
you have created your alerts as an infrastructure in the system.
Yes. So the main job was what we did was like if we get so many logs or something is going wrong, so we analyze these alerts and we trigger the actions by with the help of the Pulumi, like what kind of actions to be done.
Okay, okay, understood. Also, I can see in the resume that you have achieved 90 to 95% of code coverage, which is very nice, or very good practice for unit testing. I would ask you a question that what all things you have included for your test cases, what all things you have excluded, and why did you exclude those particular parts of your code, and where those exclusions and inclusions are added as a configuration in your code.
Okay, so generally when we write the automations, I generally concentrate on the unit test cases. Like every method should have its own test cases, and I write with a JUnit 5, which supports something called nested classes. Like so I can segregate the functionalities in the test cases, and
Okay.
the mocking is something I use a lot because there are few things when you're checking about the functionality, you don't have to make a DB call every time. In that case, we can mock those calls and test you can mock what data you want to back and write your functionality for the test cases. So that will increase my test cases. I also use some code coverage tool and also Sonar Cube to do the static analysis of my code base to see what could be the could be the some technical dev, not technical dev, like some technical issues which can be fixed
And
on
you have
this.
done that in local, configured that as a
Uh,
plugin.
yes, it just we have to write. I did that for the Android project, not for the Spring Boot one, but it's pretty same. I think we just have to mention a few of the properties in our build files. Uh, what could be the because SonarCube has its own listening port numbers and also the URL, so we just have to specify those endpoints and what repository it has to check, and and we have to run a command which will run the static analysis on this.
Sounds good. Sounds good to me. I have a question on this unit testing part only. So suppose we have DTOs. DTOs have getters and setters. So you've written test cases for that also.
So generally it's a bad practice of writing for like few of the things, especially for the getters and setters and for the naming conventions and variables, because
Correct.
yeah,
That
generally
makes
we are
no sense.
repeating. Yes, yeah,
That makes no sense
generally
because
it
you're
makes, yeah, it's just adding some unnecessary code to our database,
just to
and
get
now
the percentage.
yes, yeah,
Okay. So
I have seen that
how
kind of practice as well. Like we add some test cases which doesn't help, but it will just increase the coverage.
coverage?
Yeah.
I agree. So adding the test cases for DTOs is not required. So how do you exclude those DTOs? Where is that exclusion for those DTOs written?
Uh, so we can write a like a rejects patterns which can exclude these kind of packages which we don't want to track in our coverages. So I mean, have written in XML with Maven. Like we can specify like what kind of packages we can use, like dot star for the DTOs. Like generally we follow the versioning, sorry, package patterns for all the files. Like some DTOs should go under DTO package and entity should go on entity. So these getters and setters Pojo files, we don't have to test it. So generally, when it comes to Pojo, it has to go with like integration test, which we do with running database queries.
Running database queries.
I mean, like I was talking about the entity files. Like we don't
Ah,
write the
huh.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Correct.
if something is
Correct.
wrong with that file, then our CRUD operation definitely fails.
Correct. So that can I can agree that they can be tested with the integration testing. Uh, in the previous scenario, you have given me 10 microservices. Now these microservices interacts with each other for creating your order, creating your cart. So they work seamlessly. For testing that end-to-end process, you should have some system testing in place. So did you do
Yes.
any kind of system testing with your multiple microservices so that they work simultaneously, seamlessly with each other?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I have written the test cases, but generally it's more like an integration test case only, where we make the call to the REST template with by passing the payload. So, so one way we have to ensure like these services are running, and also like the for this particular request, the corresponding response is coming back or not. So we don't
So
have
unit
to.
test cases itself you have involved this particular part.
Yes, because like even when we make a call to different microservice, we just need to pass some payload, and we also ensure like these data are getting created or responding back to this particular payload. So
But I
that's we
have a
could like
question on this practice, because what happens is whenever you are building something, every time a build test cases runs, so every time a call goes to that, so suppose three times my build stages are something like that for ci and cd, both my build cases runs. So every time your call
yeah,
actual goes to the second api, gets the data, which is not good, because it will take some time, because rest api calls are in latency introducing things. So every time unit testing the same call again and again doesn't make sense to me. So why not in this way that we can have some bdds or the cucumber test cases, where you can have
yes,
a system testing in place for these microservices rather than the unit testing with the REST API calls. So rather you can mock the REST APIs and you can test the end-to-end service with single system integration testing. Does that sounds good to you?
yeah. I mean, the for the case you mentioned, I do agree with go with the behavioral testing rather than testing with like integration way of like testing.
And that's how I look at that. Everybody have a
Yeah.
different scenarios. That the thing that you said will work, for sure it will work, but it will just add some latency here and there to your
Yes.
system, which will actually be a problematic to v developers itself. So just
Yeah,
a way to
agree. Like
prevent our time.
yeah, it's based on like use case and what kind of
Yes.
testing we are doing. We can go with a different approach.
Perfect, perfect. Even your will work, no doubt on that. Can see that you have worked with the reactive programming also. So, in which scenario you have choose to go for reactive programming, not the blocking programming that we usually do with the Spring Boot programming way?
Uh, so generally, we go with the reactive programming because the threads are limited. Like, so we can't have like threads waiting for the response to come back. So when we write any calls, these are like a synchronous calls, like because few of the operation has to be done one after the other. So in that case, we block the threads to wait for the response to come back. So in that case, we can go with the reactive programming where something called like a callback. Like once the action is done, it automatically respond back. So the whatever the thread is available, it will fetch it and execute the rest of the part. So it's need not to be like forcefully we have to use reactive programming. It depends on the applications. Wherever we find it like there are so many requests are coming, especially it could be like a streaming APIs or not streaming APIs, streaming platform or e-commerce website. We can go with a reactive program. It comes with something called Flex and Mono. Like it's the same thing. A Mono means like it will return like one instance. Like Flex is for more.
Okay. So, what kind of engine you have used? There's a reactor that you can use.
Project
How did you
Reactive.
implement? Yeah, Project Reactor. So, how did you implement that?
So it's like normal, like when we create the any Spring Boot project. So we have to specify like what kind of dependency we want. So there is something called like Project Reactor. So we can use that as a Maven or a Gradle properties. So in our POM file, so it automatically download the required jar files for us.
You just talked about Maven and Gradle. What are these two?
These are called like a different way of writing the build files. So
These are
one
build
is the
tools.
build tools, not build file, build tools. So when we generally, I think all of us like familiar with the Maven, which we easily see with pom.xml. The Gradle is also something which does similar. We can see that whenever we use any packages, whenever we check it in an MVN repository, there are different flavors available. One is Maven, other one is Gradle. So Gradle is like its naming convention are a bit different, but it does the same. But I noticed the Gradle works a bit faster than the Maven. I mean, it could be the internal architecture, but there is no hard and fast rule. We can go with any approach.
Perfect. So, okay. So, what is POM? Why did you use POM in your applications?
Uh, so the main problem if you don't use POM is like if you want to enhance our jar files to the next, next versioning. So the thing is like I have to do manually. That's the main problem. Like I have to install the new version, put it in the respective folder, so that my code will be running as is it. And another problem is like if I'm giving my project to someone else and the other user doesn't have the required versioning, then it is a problem. The code doesn't start to run. So the good way to automate this is by using something called POM file, where I can specify what is my jar and what is the version I want. So what it will do, it will first go in the check it in the local Maven repository if it is available. If it not, it will go and check it in the global. So in this way, behind the picture, it will get all the jars and it will run so that user won't find any manual task to install any jar files.
Otherwise, you have to add those jar files to a build packages and then.
Packages,
Uh,
class
Correct.
path.
I agree. Correct. Correct. Class path. I agree. So yeah, that's where you define all your starters, your required external libraries, where you can have it in a one single chunk. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. So that was about POM. You have okay. Um, Now I have one more thing I can see in your resume. You have worked with Kanban. So can you please explain what is Kanban and why did you use it?
Uh, Kanban is, you're talking about the Scrum architectures, right? Kanban.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I got confused.
No,
So,
no, that is true.
yeah, okay.
Agree.
So, this is how we can like, this is one of the like project management, like I think we all are familiar with agile methodologies, like how we do. The Kanban also works like in a similar way. It's not predictive, it's like adaptive. Like it means what, like we do the changes as and when like requirements come into picture. uh, I haven't worked in any team which uses Kanban, but sometimes the team uses mix of like Kanban and also like Scrum. So yeah, I work mainly in the Scrum and the Agile methodologies.
And that's written in a resume. You can be hit up on this.
Oh, okay. I did not check that.
No worries, no worries. Just have a look at this Kanban thing
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
have written in this. I think this is more of the strict way of following the sprint work, as far as I understand. Okay. So the next thing I would have asked you is that what is concurrent hash map? Why would you use it, and how it works internally?
So like the main with the regular hash map, what we use is something called like a fail fast sorry it's a fail fast hashing. It means what, like whenever we are iterating on this hash map and concurrently if something is going change in this hash map, let's say like we are adding new entries, so it will throw an exception because the way it works in a different way, because it keep on check the hash size. If something is getting changed, it will throw the exception called concurrent hash map exception. To avoid this kind of like scenario, we can go with like a new family of the hashing is called concurrent hash map. So it will works in an efficient way, so that even if you do add any entities to the hash map while you are iterating, so it will be efficient to handle that kind of scenarios. So
And that
that will be very
exception
useful when we
is.
have a, yeah, exception will be I don't think any exception will come, because this is kind of like a main hashing we use, especially for the multi-threaded environments when there are more than one threads are manipulating on the same hash map.
So how does it work internally? How it makes sure that multiple threads are working concurrently without any concurrent modification exception coming?
Because it's yeah, when we say multi-threading, the main issue is like it can one thread can tamper the data of which other thread is accessing or updating. So it uses concept of synchronized so that no two threads can it's called mutual exclusion. No two threads can enter the shared block critical section in the same time. But for the concurrent hash map, it will have like let's say you have a hash map size of 16, then it have a like a capacity of like by 2. It means like 8 thread can parallelly access the hash map in a concurrent way. It means like it will reserve two blocks for each of these threads, so that no other thread can so that other thread can access the rest of the blocks.
Okay, so basically, you want to say that the complete map is divided into segments, and each segment
Yes.
is logged by a particular thread. Another thread cannot, if it is reading, everybody can read all the segments, but if it is writing,
Yeah.
only that segment lock is taken by that thread. Other threads are okay to be accessing the other segments. Sounds great.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's
Uh,
a thread size.
Correct. It's thread safe in that way. And since it is better with performance with the synchronized one, we are going with the concurrent hash map. Perfect. Also, I would ask you the last question from my end. The hash map is a key value pair, right? So for the
Yeah.
key, you usually have IDs, integers. Now, if suppose an employee class, I want to make it a key. So what all things I have to make to that particular class to make it a capable enough class to become a key for a hash map?
So generally, if you want to make any object as the key, the two things we have to override, one is the equal method and other one is hash code. So the main reason is like even though we have to ensure that whether these two objects are same or not, it can be easily distinguished based on these two methods. So whenever when we do any put, it will automatically call these methods and get to ensure that whether it is a update to the same object or it is a new insert. So based on the
Perfect.
implementation of the equals method.
Because the key has to be unique always in the hash map. That is why to make the uniqueness consistent, you have to have the hash code equals override. Perfect.
Yes.
uh, I think that is it from my end. I'll just go with a quick feedback. Most of the questions you have answered perfectly fine. You're all set for the interviews. Go ahead, crack it up. All the very best for all your interviews. Just have a quick look with the Spring Security here and there, and else you are perfectly fine. Also, have a look at the keywords that you've added in the resume because they are very attractive. When
Yes.
I saw your resume, it's perfect resume. I mean, if I would been given a chance, I would show this resume to other candidates that this is how your resume should be. So
Okay.
if the time permits, if you have some enough time, I'll do that session with you. So just have a small here and there, and you're all set for your interviews. Um, any feedback for me? Because you might be in like a situation of giving interviews. So any feedback for me if I was rude, if I was all set?
No, no. I like this interview session very well uh, comparatively to the previous one because the previous one was mainly on Java. This was like bit beyond, and also it included some hands-on, which I noticed most of the company would do because they do not just the question answer; they also do something called system design interview nowadays. Uh, so, which I felt it very useful from your platform. Yeah, I would really like to see. I think I took your Udemy subscription. There I noticed how we are orchestrating the applications, right? So I mean, I really would like to see those kind of videos more because nobody would does that kind of videos. The only way we feel that when we join the companies.
I agree. Thank you so much for that. But thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with the community. It will really help the community a lot, and you're all set and prepared for interviews. For 5 years experience, you are all set and all good. So all the very best. Thank you so much. So that was all about the mock interview we had with Dinesh, and he is like very well prepared according to us. Thank you so much, Dinesh, for taking your time out and helping us to have this knowledge shared with the community. Also, if you want to be a part of this mock interview series and you want to see how good we are with this particular front, just let us know by adding your details in the Google form which is given in the description bar below. Add your details and we will reach as soon as possible to you. Thank you.